Kaustubh is a PhD student at UPenn, and he will be presenting some points about how to strengthen your applications in the 2021 cycle. Both Kaustubh and I are PhD students in the US, and so this presentation will be more US centric, but we might have some tips and tricks to crack the European admission cycle as well. Before I hand over to Kaustubh, I'll just quickly introduce Bahujan Econ to everyone who's present. Most of you know that Bahujan Economist is a platform for researchers, scholars, students, and professors belonging to the SC, ST, OBC communities in economics to collaborate and support each other, and for allies to extend support to us. Along with an attempt to increase our representation in research, the group's objective is also to put forward our perspectives that have been largely absent until now from the discipline. BE is a collective that provides support to students of marginalized communities in the field of economics. And I welcome everyone, and I'm very happy to hand this over to Kaustubh right now. Thank you, Kaustubh, for being here today.
Hello, am I audible? Yeah. Hi. Good evening, everybody. It's good morning in our part of the world. You can see Aarushi just sipping her coffee. And Jai Bhim to everybody who's present here. And it's a what do you say, great privilege to be part of this initiative that Aarushi, Aditi, and everybody else has put together. I sincerely hope more of our students are able to sort of cross that barrier and reach opportunities of higher education in India and abroad. And yeah, so I would like to apologize right in the beginning because this meeting is, I think, scheduled for like 1.5 hours, but there's some last minute travel that is happening for me, so I'll have to rush through it, and at some point I will have to leave. But what I'll do is I'll right away put my email ID in the chat box. So what I'm hoping, and I was talking to Aarushi also last time, that I'm hoping this is probably one of the many sessions or one of the many interactions we will have because so that, if anybody of you want to work on your proposal over a longer period and need a feedback, at least from my side, I would be really happy to have a look at them and just help you. Yeah, having said that, I'll just start with some brief, general tips, and then I'll go into a structure that I have followed in writing my application. So I'll just sort of speed through this, and then if you have any questions before I could leave, that would be great. So now, first and foremost is that there is no perfect template for an application because various departments in the US universities will expect you to write it differently. The one you apply in Colombia does not mean, when you send in Colombia, for example, does not necessarily mean that it will be, people will receive it in the same way as Brown. So there is no standard template, but there are certain standard expectations out of an SOP. So, and you need to if you sort of address those, there is like a higher chance of, that getting shortlisted. And also to give you a brief how the selection process goes on. So I roughly understand, if I'm assuming most of you are going to apply for the economics department, of which like I have no clue. So, even when I was going through my SOP today, I realized, this might, there might be some sort of disciplinary changes that might have. I have done it for like area studies. I had done for one for history that was slightly different from what I wrote for area studies. So we need to sort of be attentive to which department we're applying, which discipline we're applying to, what kind of people are there, and what kind of, uh, generally academic culture of that department. So these things, they're not difficult to figure out.
Hot coffee
The,
or the tonic water coffee?
excuse me.
I'm having hot coffee.
I'll just mute. Oh, okay.
Okay, sorry. Where was I? Oh yeah, it's not. What I was saying was, even though there are these departmental, variations, it is not difficult to figure out. So let's not, don't get pressured by it. It's just something that if one needs to know, if one knows, then it will be better. And I'll give you a brief sort of journey of. So I applied twice. I applied in 2016 when I was fresh out of my MA, and then I applied to two universities, um, and I was rejected in one, and I was offered an MA instead of a PhD in another. And then I obviously, because MA came without funding, so I refused that offer. I joined for my MPhil at JNU, and then I applied again to three universities, out of which I was selected in one, waitlisted in one, and rejected from one. Uh, First thing, first thing I told you obviously is that there is no standard template for your SOP. And second thing is you will have to sort of face rejection. So, you know, ideally what people say is that you sort of like apply from a pool of 5 to 6 universities, and I know that can be a bit taxing on your pocket, because but I'm sure we'll be able to put some resources and strategies together to sort of address those issues. Those are very logistical issues. um, Coming back to the SOP. I'm sorry, I'm just घूम रहा हूँ यहाँ वहाँ पे. So uh, second tip would be like keep it as concise as possible. Your SOP can, ideally it should be like 1.5 pages without spacing. Because what happens is there are often people who are assigned to read the incoming application. Each department, I think, roughly would receive 100 to 300 applications every year. Okay, out of which, depending on what cohort size they have, like for my department, they only choose 2 people. Okay, so they'll shortlist some 10 people for interview. So you need to sort of keep it as concise as possible, because people read it like in speed. So the short, I am not saying shorter. I'm saying it concise to the bare minimum that is required, so that it is easier for people to sort of screen it and then send your application to the next cycle. Um, Keep checking for like spellings and grammatical errors. I think that's the most basic and primary sort of expectation. And there is this, and some of you might know, Grammarly is is a freely available tool that you can use just to like sort of weed out, because trust me, even it does not, spelling mistakes and grammatical errors don't really sort of don't have not much relation with how fluent in English you are. It I even after I submitted my SOP, I realized there was one grammatical error, one spelling mistake, and I was like, oh shit, like, but how did they even select me for this? But because when you that it can just cause you anxiety after you have sent it. So it's better that you make sure that it's every time you write, every time you do a new draft, go put it through Grammarly and just like check if everything is okay. Um, have a peer or a mentor group that will read your application and give you feedback, correct things for you, tweak things for you. And I think Bojan Econ is also, I mean, this initiative at the Bojan Econ is also imagined as a space. I'm just, assuming. So reach out to anybody who's associated with this initiative. Reach out to me. And probably we'll have more people. In past, I've seen couple of years, a lot of people on Twitter have sort of volunteered to do that. So just don't be shy of putting your writing out there, because if you are entering academia, that's what you will be expected to do eventually. So have a group which will give you honest feedback, and whatever feedback they give, it is not criticism on your personal ability to write or personal ability to sort of think, but it's just because people have gone through this process, and it's an arduous process. I mean, today we are just talking about SOP, but I don't know, अगर वक्त मिले तो we can sort of even think कि मतलब what is this, how do you even like deal with that kind of process, which is a fairly long process. um yeah, so having, and also, I mean, one thing would be start writing early. So if you're because I think the deadlines are mostly last first December is a lot of US universities have either first December as the deadline or 15th December as the deadline. And some of the other state universities I've seen, like SUNY, for example, in New York, they had 15th January as a deadline. So do keep checking the deadline. And I think if you start writing now, let's say, because I'm assuming if you're not taken the GRE and TOEFL, you'll have to also make time for those exams to take. So either you can do the GRE TOEFL before and then start working on the application, or you can start the application and while you're doing that, because applying, what I realized from my example, because I did it quite last minute, and because application is not just sending your SOP, you need to send like several documents, transcripts, like there's a lot of material that you need to send. Amidst of all this, you also need to write your SOP. So I think just slightly be more attentive to the SOP and start writing from before, which also gives you a time for sending it for feedback. So I did almost like 4 to 5 drafts of my SOP before I sent it in for my first application, and then tweaked it. And that's the other thing I was going to tell you is that department wise, you might have to tweak it. Not necessarily that, if you are, let's say, if you are an econ student, and the professor that you want to work with might not be in an econ department. He might be in a political science, or she might be in a political science department or sociology department. I mean, so you also need to be slightly aware of these things. If you're applying to a certain department, you might have to tweak a little bit, just to suit that department's requirements. Uh, I usually, in at least in social science, humanities, the convention is that you write to the professors that you want to work with beforehand. But Arushi told me that that's not a convention in, let's say, economics, for example. But if you do end up writing, and if the professors are sort of more than willing to sort of read your work, please ask them if you can send them the proposal. Some professors will outrightly reject because they will think that that might be conflict of interest or whatever. But some will be more than happy to have a look. And this is not something that they do like under the table order. This is fairly encouraged in the US academia. So don't be shy of at least asking, and also don't send directly. Please ask like if they would be able to sort of they would have the time to have a look at those. So these were like my, general tips. I'll just, because I took notes, I will just put it in the chat box, and you can just copy them from there. Okay. And so now coming to the SOP. Um, so probably as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So I've sort of divided into like 9 parts. And what is expected of an SOP. Again, just to reiterate the point, there is no what do you say? There's no standard format of writing an SOP or no standard formula of writing an SOP. But uh, but again, as I said, there are certain expectations. So what I mean, the first paragraph, what you do is you spell out a broad area of your SOP. Okay, so so assume that there are like 100 applications, and somebody just there is TAs like me will be assigned to like read your SOPs, for example. And because professors would not be like also like if there are 300 applications coming in, the professor would not be reading all 300 applications. They will assign their own TAs or junior faculty members to sort of read those and then screen them and then create a shorter list. After that, again a shorter list is created, so it goes through an iteration. So what you do is you spell your broad idea in your first paragraph, so that while the first thing that the reader is reading your application, they realize, oh, this is about XYZ domain, XYZ field, or this is a new method that they're trying to sort of. Okay. So this seems interesting. Let's select this for now. Because often what happened is people start introducing themselves, and then at somewhere at the end or in the middle, the work that you're going to do at the department is mentioned. So people have to really scout for it. So ideally, it would be better that you start with introducing the broad research area that you have. Okay. So after having done that, you secondly you do a paragraph or two on what are the issues with the present scholarship. Okay. So, for example, I mean, I can't think of any economics example. Um, so, I'll give you example from my SOP. So, my research work is on the history of a language called Konkani, which is spoken on the southwest coast of India. So, I say, okay, this is my broad area of research. Secondly, the issue would be how have, like, say, histories of languages been written in or how histories of languages are understood in South Asia, for example. And we often mistake language with a region. We often sort of complement a language with a region. So Konkani is for Goa, Marathi is for Maharashtra, Tamil is for Tamil Nadu. But if we see these borders are like very interconnected. So you say, okay, maybe this is the issue that we see languages in terms of their states and not in terms of the people that they speak. So this could be just an example. So you, in the second paragraph, you highlight what has been the present scholarship on your the research that you're doing, and what are the problems in it that you want to address. So this becomes your second part, is how what problems you're going to address. What are the gaps in the scholarship that you see? And the third part would be then necessarily following, if once you've addressed the problems, is that how you are going to sort of respond to this issue. Either you're going to solve it or either you're going to complicate it. It could be, it's not like you need to offer a solution, but you say, oh, maybe in this particular survey, this factor or this variable was not taken in consideration. And I think if we take into that consideration, it changes the nature of the output. So in this third part, you say that, okay, this is how I am going to approach this same survey done by like 10 different economists before me. So these become your three parts. So in the first three paras, you have stated the scope of your project. And then you come to, let's say, in my application, it was archival, what archives I'm going to use, if it's a historical project, if it's a contemporary thing or contemporary research topic. It could be notes about your field, for example. Where are you going to do this work? Is it in India? Is it like across countries, continents, whatever? So give a bit of an information of that, and then you proceed to method. What is the method that you're bringing to the table? How is it different from what has been done before? uh, you know what, and again, I mean, I'm not able to sort of think on my feet about examples from economics. Maybe like Aarushi at some point will sort of address this. So we are done with like about 5 parts, which is again broad idea, issues with your present scholarship, how are you going to address the issues, information about field or archives, and the method. So in first 5 paragraph, you spelled out um, your research area. Then you come to your personal information. Um, Basically, it could be your academic biodata, okay, which means that what have you studied before? You've done your bachelor's in economics, master's, MPhil, whatever. So you say that which institute you have done it from. If you have done a thesis, mention the title of the thesis and probably in a line just explain what that thesis was about. If you're presented at a conference or a paper that you presented, could go in that as well. So just to sort of indicate that you have been engaging into this discipline for quite some time now for you to be considered as a serious applicant. Um, because US may usually in the US there are two kinds of applications that I have sort of fairly found. One is where people go with like very step by step idea of the project, and some applications are there where and this I've seen with mostly students based in the US. Okay, because they come with a very brief or rough idea. I'm trying to think this is what I might be ending up doing. So they don't have that kind of idea. But often with international students, for example, they are rather more stricter in terms of what kind of applications they select. So the one that I wrote was something that gave a fair bit of an idea that I knew about my field and my research fairly well to begin the PhD. Um, so what the ये जो मतलब people who sort of give a very vague idea about the research, they often write their own personal story. I was this, I was that, and I've done this course, that course, and I've volunteered here and there. That is also important because the departments here will not just judge you on your academic capabilities, but also how much you are you can be a good part of the cohort, because if they're selecting 10 students who will progress through the PhD simultaneously, uh, how cooperative you are, how understanding you are. So these interpersonal skills also matter, and so SOP is that one place you have got to showcase all of it. Okay, so there you, after you've done spelling out your academic sort of biodata in a paragraph, okay, just mention bachelor's, master's, which institutes will you go to, if there is some other complementary course that you have done which can make a stronger case for application. And after that, a paragraph about what is your engagement in outside academia, in let's say, if you're using, let's say, knowledge of economics to sort of apply to real life examples. For example, I, when I was doing my MA and MPhil, I used to write a column in a newspaper back in Goa. So I wrote that, that my aim is to sort of take this academic scholarship and make it more available to common people. So this kind of this uh, I mean, don't also be stressed that if you're not doing it. Okay, I mean that is also perfectly fine, but it adds to your application. If you're volunteered for some NGO, if you've taken part in activities at college, if done some project, all that can go into this. And one important, I don't know, again, like Aarushi might help me here. One important aspect, especially as an international student or a South Asian student who comes to the US, is your language skills. Uh, because if you're going to take your field research in let's say India or Pakistan, Bangladesh, wherever, they would also want to know what are your language skills. Are you skilled to sort of do you know the languages of the areas that you would be researching. So you can say so because my PhD was about history of a language itself. So I am looking at almost 3 languages and 5 scripts. So I had to tell them, okay, I know this much. I know Konkani, I know Marathi, I know basic Portuguese, and but I want to read also. I want to learn to read Kannada and Malayalam. And then again, that department is perhaps the only department in the US, like UPenn's South Asia department, the only department in the US which offers those many language courses. So I said, okay, that is also one of the reasons why I'm applying, because you have these language courses that you're teaching here, so I can take those courses. So one paragraph about at least one part about your language skills would be beneficial for your applications. And the coming to the last part would be is that you tell the department how you are going to benefit from the department and how the department might benefit also from you. So basically here is where you write which professor or which professors you would be interested in working with and why. And there, because and it also helps if you have a fair idea of the professor's work, if if they've written a book or a monograph or an essay, which is like something that really helped you to think through your own problems, your own research problems. So I think that can be, this is where you write it. So uh, this probably their method is what you are interested in, or probably the field that they did the research in is your interest. Or broadly they are sort of working on similar things that you are. They may be working on South America, for example, but you find similarities or comparative sort of similarities from South America and India. So you say, okay, there is a possibility of a comparative research that I can conduct with this professor. So this is where you tell them. And one important tip which I did not know in my first cycle of application, where I did not get an admission, and which somebody told me in the second round of my application, is that write to multiple professors in the same department. Because often happens that you fixate on one professor and you just write to that one professor, uh, because the admissions are decided by a committee. Okay, so it's the department faculty sits together. There might be like 10 faculty members. We have a history department at UPenn which has almost 30 faculty members. Okay, so it's a large group that sits. So if there's only one professor who's vouching for you, it may or may not work. But if you have a group of professors sort of saying, okay, we all are interested in this application, it might make your application stronger. And there is nothing wrong in writing like to multiple professors. Okay, it's not that you need to sort of like really pay your sort of like commit yourself to like one professor and not look at others. But the more professors are interested in your work, the higher the chances of your application getting selected. So yeah, I mean, and then sort of you mention all their names and see, this is Professor XYZ is, he has done work on this. and I would like to work. This is where I would like to have his help, or Professor X, ABC has done this work, and I would like her guidance for this part of my research. So this is a broad structure. Again, I will paste this as well in oh shit. I think okay. एक minute, just give me a minute, okay? SOP format. I think the last message that I sent went only to Zainab. So I'm just like uh, pasting it again here. These are like the general tips. Yeah. So that's all from my side. If you want to read my, I mean, I've sent my SOP to a lot of people. So in case if you think that reading my SOP might give you a better idea, because the broader format that I have sort of pasted here is from my SOP. So if you would want to have a look at it, I would be happy to share it with you. Aarushi, I mean, do they have access to a Google Drive or something where, you can just upload it and then everybody can access it or something?
We can share if you want to do that, we have like internal.
Yeah. So I will send. Okay, so I'll send it to Aarushi
Yeah,
and
put
you
it
guys
up
can
on
sort
the
of.
page.
Yeah. Put it up wherever. So I don't. I mean, because now I don't mind like putting it out, because I also realize this. A lot of people are very skeptical in sharing their SOPs, but I happily share and uh, you know. Um, yeah. I mean, that's all from my side, and I would be more than happy to sort of what do you say, if you just can write to me again. I will put my, for people who join later, this is my email ID. Right. I mean, I might not respond immediately sometimes, but I respond fairly regularly. So if you have an idea, if you want to send a draft, please feel free to just send it. And if you want to just talk about the process or whatever, I'm open for all these kinds of assistance that I can provide at this point. Yeah, thank you. I hope I didn't bore you guys. Sorry, because this was slightly unstructured. I did not expect it to go this way, but whatever. Yeah.
Thank you, Kaustubh. I guess like before you go, maybe we could pick up some questions. I also
Yeah,
have
sure.
a bunch
Yeah.
of points, but yeah, just like checking if someone has specific questions directed to you, and then I can take up the more econ related SOP points after that. Yeah, you can feel free to type them in the chat or unmute yourself and just ask if you want. Hi,
Hi,
Aditi.
Aditi. We can't hear you.
Just wanted to ask, what is the difference between SOP and personal statement? I know you are focused on SOP and Aarushi is also going to talk about it. Could you just give a little bit idea about personal statement and how important that is? Because I've been
Uh,
checking some schools and not every school asks for personal statement. Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, again, and that's what I was going to say. Not all schools will ask for a personal statement, but some did. Like I had applied to use a University of California, Santa Cruz, few years, not couple of years ago, few years ago, and they had asked me a separate personal statement. So that's where you write about yourself in a broader detail. So in that case, you can just reduce the details, personal details in your SOP and put it in the personal statement. So and again, this is a very specific thing to people from our communities, is that a lot of us would be first generation learners or second generation learners or people who have not gone for higher education. So I think it would if you are expected to write a personal statement, it would be very crucial to mention these things, that the kind of histories that all of us come from, the kind of hard, I mean, the sheer difficulties of lack of education that our communities have had to see. So that's where all this information can go. And because in last few years, and especially since last year, uh, US universities are really emphasizing on diversity, and it is sort of, even you can see that in their hiring policies and kind of curriculums that they're coming up with. Diversity is probably becoming I mean, there can be critiques of it, but whatever. But as long as it helps sort of us to make a stronger case for our application, I think it is crucial that we write in personal. So it could be about, it could also be about, the hardship that your families have faced, and thus, for you, how big a step this would be in your career or in your life for having access to a PhD program in that said university. I think we often sort of undervalue sometimes personal stories, because at least in India, it's most of it is very it's done in very formal sort of manner, very bureaucratic manner. Here in the personal statement, there is a chance, there is an opportunity for you to add a personal sort of narrative or personal story to that application. And yeah, Aditi, does that answer your question? I mean, I had written one personal statement long time ago, but I didn't have to write it, at least in the last three universities that I applied for. So,
Okay.
but some universities will, I think, I don't know, maybe it's UC, like if you're applying to UCLA, UC Berkeley, they might ask you, and some of the other state universities, but I don't know. I mean, you have to check with like individual universities.
I think Saurabh had a question. He had raised his hand.
There is one in the chat box. Uh, uh, I can I just answer this once in the chat box, Aarushi?
I think
So Marva Call has asked, is it necessary to have a published paper before you apply for a PhD? No, it is not necessary. I still don't have a published paper. Are interviews a part of application process everywhere? Not necessarily. I went through an interview at UPenn. It is very department specific, and how many applications they get as opposed to how many applications they need to select. So when I was interviewed, there were 7 people, out of which they selected 2. Yeah, so this is so interviews will be there. Be ready for interview, and interviews are mostly the easier part of the application process, if I would say so. Where they'll ask you very casual questions, just, or maybe they'll ask you to elaborate more on your research. That because they also know that a 1.5-page SOP cannot sort of like do justice to explaining what your research is. So if you're selected for interview, they might ask you, okay, tell us about more what you could not write in SOP. Tell us about that, and they'll also ask you to ask questions to them also. So yeah, so it is not necessary. It's not necessary that everywhere you will have an interview. What are the best ways to spend the time between acceptance? Don't ask me, because between my acceptance and wait, acceptance. I maybe wait. Acceptance and post graduation. Can you explain that question, Naseem? I understood differently. Maybe I thought between acceptance and joining the department, because I got my acceptance and the next month was pandemic, so I had to defer my joining for a semester. Garima has asked, does one need to apply separately for scholarship funding for PhD in USA? Generally, no. Your PhD offer will come with a 5 years, I mean, at minimum 5 years or 4 years of funding guaranteed for you. And that's one good thing about the US PhD, is that in 80 to 90% of PhD programs, the funding will be guaranteed. So you don't have to look for other There are some departments which will offer you like a 1 year funding, and then later you can, but later you will be asked to work as a TA or an RA. But if they're selecting you, be quite sure that they have thought something about your funding. You don't have to every year. I mean, some of my friends in UK, for example, they were telling me that every year they have to sort of like, while they're writing the thesis, also they have to worry about how much, where the next pool of money is going to come from. So yeah, US PhDs are mostly funded. So, and the information about that will be available on each department's website. There will be a column called fundings or financial aid or whatever. So like I have a package which funds me for 5 years and 3 summers. And 2 summers I can apply for an external funding, or there are other funds, grants also that you can apply for. So yeah, like finishing up an MA and getting accepted to a program if rejected for now. Oh, I mean, I think what you can do is, Asim, now I get it, is probably you start, I mean, think more about I mean, if you had like a rejection, just chill for some time. Don't take it personally. Rejections are in no measure, they're not a measure of your academic capability. Uh, People get, I mean, I've seen a lot of my friends much better than me getting rejected from universities, and especially if you had applied this year. Please, please, please do not, because this year has been terrible in terms of admissions. Most of the departments did not have admissions this year. So if it was this year, please don't be harsh on yourself. Take a deep breath and take some rest and start working on it. Read more maybe. Which departments do you sort of want to work at? Just pick up a book or a paper by some of the professors who are working there. Read about them. See how that can sort of be incorporated in your research. I think you can. I to spend that time reading more academic material, because especially in MA, you do like this speed dating kind of a thing with reading. So often it becomes you don't have that kind of time that you have. And I mean, I've had friends who have done jobs between that, made so that they could also fund their application. So I mean, there are lots of other things. Yeah, and
Maybe Kaustubh will take the rest of them after.
okay, cool.
That's okay.
Yeah, so I will take your leave at this point because I have a friend who's come to pick me up.
Yeah.
So, but I will be more than happy to be part of this again. So yeah.
Great.
So
Thank
bye,
you, and thank
everybody.
you for putting out your email address, because we think we also agree that it's very important to maybe have more personalized feedback, because every person has had a different
Yeah,
journey and a
yeah,
different research idea. So it'll be of great help.
sure.
So I'll just quickly jump into points that I had. I think Venkatesh has been unmuted. Okay, great. So I'll just quickly jump into the more econy points, and just a disclaimer before I start. I've put together these points with the help of a friend here at Brown, whose name is Suved, who has also offered to give personalized feedback to your SOPs. I'm typing in his email ID as well, because again, I think it's very important to have more tailor-made feedback to SOPs than these general points are useful, but only to an extent. So I think like my first general point is that you should know your subfield or your topic very well, like at the back of your hand, because this has to be the central theme of your SOP. Now, here I just want to flag that having a writing sample here for economics applications here is a definite plus. And I'll come to that later, but still, like, even if you don't have an SOP, you should have, even if you don't have a writing sample, you should have a very good idea of what your subfield of what your topic is. And I think there, like the broad points that Kaustubh gave are very, very useful about what is the topic, what are the gaps in the literature, and how you're going to fill them up. Because like everybody is not a specialist in your field. And so you need to give them a sense of why they should fund your research. So you need to tell them what is missing in the literature and how you're going to fill it up right at the beginning in the SOP. I'll send some links in the chat which provide like a useful template. These are links from I think Duke and Chicago and so on. They are actually very useful as templates to write down your SOPs. I'll just post them when I'm done talking. I would advise the student to sort of forget everything to begin with and take a day to go through all of these links and carefully think about like various strategies and processes of writing applications. The second point is about stating personal history along with the research interest. I think Costa covered very well about why it is important for students belonging to this collective to talk about their personal history, and also to point out that diversity is very important, has become very important in the US. Now, again, you can be critical of that because I do think that most of these are sort of like tokenist measures that have been taken by these university, but as long as it helps us get students from the collective into US universities, we should definitely encash upon it. But you should keep in mind that the guidelines from SOP guidelines that I will be sharing are more general, and different universities sort of ask for a different combination of documents. So, for instance, at an institution which only asks for an SOP, it will ideally have some personal detail along with the project or degree interest, whatever. Whereas if they ask for a separate academic interest and personal history statements, which are also called diversity statements, I remember at Yale they had asked for a diversity statement, then the SOP has to be more research oriented and the personal story can sort of go into the other document. Okay. Moreover, personal history should also contextualize your academic interest and not be a generalized story. Does that make sense? So it needs to be like some thinking about what will work or what will not work, and how, like, why are you asking that question, and what aspect of your personal life has influenced you asking this particular question. And we all know that what the kind of question you ask depends on the background you're coming from, correct? But like, remember that the golden rule here is to begin early. Make a list of things that are asked for, keep revising your drafts. I think this is something that Costa also emphasized a lot. It is a time consuming process, but you'll get over it, as so many of us have. So why do universities ask for SOPs? What is the main thrust of the SOP? Remember that SOP is basically a matchmaking document. Okay, so this match has to be for for a very specific field. Okay, so like, don't go to departments where nobody is working on development economics if you want to work on India. Like, I know a lot of people who just applied to schools that have really big names, and they got in also because they had good marks or whatever, but they're having a really hard time now finding a supervisor. So because nobody there works on India, for example. So I think it's important to like see what is the university. Do you find at least one person who works on the same thing as you do, and ideally you want there to be more than one person who works on the same thing as you do. And I think this was a very important point that was made by Costa. So the thrust of the SOP is the following. You have to essentially say, I am the best student you can recruit. I have a great trajectory, so many skills, what a great understanding. Okay. I am the best out there. You are my dream department and dream university, and I want to work with all the amazing faculty there. Give me a chance and you will realize that this was the best ever decision you ever made. I think like this is something that was told to me before, and I didn't actually take it seriously, and I wish I did. But always use the first person. Say I. Don't be shy about it. This is America. Okay, you have to be your own salesperson on the SOP. Now, why like I when I wrote my SOP, I wrote it in passive voice. Like I was always very shy of using the first person. I would say don't make that mistake. Um, then the next point I had was about writing to professors. This is something that is usually discouraged in economics. Like I have seen this to be written on many websites. And I think this was also a question raised to Andrew Foster, who is also my advisor, in a session that he had, in a BE session that he had kindly spoken at. And he sort of said, yeah, don't send us emails, it can annoy people or whatever. But I honestly don't see a harm in doing it. What is the worst case scenario? They will not reply and they will forget about it, right? Like, but what is the best case scenario is that they will see your email and they will be like, wow, I really want to work with this student. And they might as well like put in a good word for you. So I personally don't see a harm in doing this. And what I realized after getting into the program is that people do it all the time anyway. So I feel like a lot of us want to play by the rules because we have our own notions of fairness and ethics. Don't fall into that trap, I would say. Um, so, but if you are sending that email, then like make sure you do it very well. Like you don't want to piss off some big professor in some corner of the world. So you want to. It is very important to first like know your topic, define your research question very precisely, and this is I think very important in econ. Like not only know your subtopic that hey I want to work on for instance maternity benefits, and if you're applying to economics the question is what about it, like so you can think of what is the impact of maternity benefits on on female labor force participation, right? So this has to be a very precise research question, and you have to also say what is the method you're going to be following. Is it sort of the staggered implementation of the program that sort of buys you some sort of variation which is exogenous? And I think like those things have to be very precise if you're writing to someone. Then I would say like read their work. um, don't just read their abstracts. It is something I used to do. It got me into trouble. Sell them your work. Like once you know their work, then sell them your own work. Okay. And then convince them that they would benefit from your presence in the department. I think one must spend time going through the websites of universities, check the faculty, program, kinds of courses, and so on, and then tailor the tailor the proposal according to that particular department. And I think this is very important. Like you have to spend time on tailoring the SOP to that department. Like even if it's just like one, that's what I did. My SOP was sort of the same, but I had one paragraph about who I want to work with in that department and so on. And like think a little bit about who you want to work with in that department because the match is very important. Like, and I emphasize on the word match. Applicants have usually more chances of success when department feels that they have just the kind of resources that would benefit the interest of a particular prospective applicant, and this has to be clearly outlined in the proposal. Okay. Then I want to talk a little bit about letters of recommendation. Very touchy topic. I still have nightmares about asking my professors for LORs. But I want to emphasize, and this is something I learned when I actually got in, that this is the single most important thing for your application. Okay, like I never read my letters of recommendation, but in hindsight, now I know that they were probably very good. But that is literally the only thing that matters. Now, the question is, how do you get good recommendation letters? Okay. I think one way of getting a good recommendation letter is by working on a writing sample. That's what I did. Um, so why do you need the writing sample? Like universities will never read it, okay, but it is still a very powerful signal of researchability. Like not sending a writing sample sends out a signal, but like sets you apart as a weaker candidate. So you want to send the writing sample so that you meet a threshold requirement, even though like nobody's ever going to read the writing sample. Like they get too many applications, they don't have the time. Okay, but I stress on writing the writing sample is because it gives like material for your letter writers to work with. Okay. um so like make sure you communicate to your referees about your project, send them drafts of your SOPs, of your CV, and work on the writing sample with them so that they can see it evolve. Like I think nobody expects the first draft of your writing sample to be perfect. I think in research, what is important and what you want to demonstrate is that you learn very fast. Okay, like this is something I learned from my advisor. Like they don't expect you to know everything from the day you were born, but they want to see if like how you work with their feedback and if you're able to incorporate it well. So if there is an improvement from where you start your writing sample to where you ended it with, I think that's what gives them hope that you learn. Because like PhD is all about learning skills very fast and very intensively. Like I only knew data before coming here, and now I write like programs in Python and do machine learning and stuff. Like this is stuff I did not know before and I learned it myself. So that is the signal that you want to give, is that I learn things very fast. Okay. um so but also like when you're choosing letter writers, it is better that only those people write who have taught you or with whom you have worked. So don't go for like just a general reco from like a big name. That is just not effective. Like people do that a lot in the US, like get a recommendation from like this, Nobel laureate, and the Nobel laureate has no idea about this person. So like it doesn't work. You need a very personalized and a very strong letter of recommendation. Okay, so make sure it is someone who knows you, who adores you, who loves you and like showers you. Okay, so that is very important. The GRE also from an econ perspective application is an important thing. It's not important in the sense that if you get your chances will improve if you get 168 or 167. I think it's more of a threshold thing with the GRE. And the threshold for quant, I think, is 167. That is the advice that was given to me. If you have above 167 out of 170 in quant, they will consider your application. It's not like if you have 165, they won't consider your application. But I think 167 makes you very safe. Like they will look at it for sure if you have 167. I think the advice I was given was try to get a perfect 117 quant. But again, between 167 and 170, there's not much of a difference. Like this doesn't say that like if you have 170 you'll definitely get into Harvard. Like that's not a thing. It's that at Harvard, like if you have below 167, they will probably like not look at your application or whatever. I think like one advice that was not given to me that I want to stress is do not even bother to prepare about verbal part of the GRE. You will only be wasting your time. Strengthen your quant. Nobody looks at your verbal score at all. Okay. Do whatever verbal you require for TOEFL. That is it. Like, and that also TOEFL, I think, like they usually say get 110, but I don't even think anybody cares about the TOEFL. It is just a requirement. It is a way to make people spend money. Okay. But like if you have to prioritize your time, don't prepare for verbal. Okay. And I'm going to reiterate what Kaustubh said before. Get the GRE and TOEFL out of your way, because you want to get rid of that. You want a clearer mind space to work on your writing sample and your SOP. Get GRE and TOEFL out of the way as soon as you can. Like I would say um August, max August. Like before August, you should have your final score on the GRE, I would say. Then like minor point, have a list of places to apply. Get a good mix of universities, some top schools, some mid-level, and some safe ones. Also do apply to top schools. I think like I was so underconfident when I was applying, and of course like this is a thing that is that like I expect in especially women of the community, is that like we have such a low opinion of our intellect that we don't apply to top schools. Now in retrospect, I feel like for example, I didn't even apply to Berkeley, which was my top choice, because I was like, oh, there is no way I could have made it. But then when I actually saw the results of my application season, now I feel like, oh, I actually might have actually made it, you know. So don't undersell yourself. Apply to your dream school. If you want to go there, what is the worst? They will reject you. What is the best? You'll actually go to your dream school. So of course there is money involved there. So which is the biggest impediment to applying to, you know, places. And that's why I didn't apply to Berkeley, for instance. I was like, okay, I'll only be wasting money, and they won't take me. But I think like if that is an issue for you, then please write to us on our email ID. I already posted the email ID in the chat, and we can see what we can do about raising resources. There are and as you know that has become very common, at least on Twitter, in the recent past. um and finally, like all this, like do all of this preparing for SOP, making lists to apply, while keep to work on like documents that they've asked, for example transcripts. And like I underestimated how much time it will take me to get my transcript, but really, like I had to get my transcript from DU because I did my master's at Delhi school. And trust me, like I went into panic mode because they will make some random excuse to not give you your not give you your transcript in time. And yeah, you just want to avoid that last minute panic by getting your transcript like in July. Like I would say apply right now. Because those babu log at the university campus can give you a lot of trouble. um so get all of those documents well in advance. Okay. I think that's all from my side. I'll take some questions. Garima is asking, should the writing sample be econometric center, or can it be qualitative or less technical? So Garima, again, like nobody reads it, like literally nobody reads it, but it's just a signal if it's there. So, but the advice that I was given, at least when I was applying, was that if you're writing an LOR, make it technical, because you want to signal mathematical ability in economics applications. I am not sure about like what happens if you apply to say public policy programs or more generic like South Asian studies programs. But for economics, like the advice is that write lots of math. Like, so my writing sample was basically like 2 pages of integrals and equations. Uh, I'm pretty sure they were all wrong. But the point was that, oh, if someone who's flipping through it is like, oh, there's so many integrals over here. There's a Bellman equation over here. So that sort of a thing I think helps for sure. Should the LORs be from professors with PhD, or do ones with qualifications like MPhil also work? I think ones with qualifications like MPhil also work. Like, I know lots of people who have done very good work without PhDs, both in India and say in Europe. But if you're approaching those people who have MPhils, then make sure they know you very well. Like, make sure they can sell you very well. Otherwise, it's there's no point. But yeah, it's okay if they don't have PhDs, I think. um then there's a question about, can you give some tips on selecting which schools to apply to? Like, what all other factors should one consider when applying? I think the main thing is that there are, one, it should be a big department so that there is diversity of researchers working on different fields, because I understand when you're applying, it's possible you don't have a very good idea of like what you want to work on. Like, what I thought I want to work on is not even remotely related to what I actually work on right now. So you want to go to a big department where even if you plan to switch, you're able to sort of like find advisors in that field. Then I would say, once you have a list of like big departments, then think about like what you think you're interested in, and see that there are at least 3 or 4 people who work in that field, because you don't want to be stuck with, say, like one person. Okay, like, you want to be able to diversify who you're getting advice from. So I think like that would be my biggest advice, is that when you're like, know what you're remotely interested in, and then sort of like um see if there are 3 to 5 people in that department who work on that thing. And then you can sort of I would say, like, make a gradation, like what are top ranked schools. And I think the rankings are totally nonsense. So like you what is it, the US? Yeah, I'm even forgetting. They're like absolute crap. Okay, like, so I would say just go by like a sense of what is the top department, and then like what is harder to get into, then a medium range department which you think like it most probably will take you, and then like keep some safe departments at the end. Okay, like and again, like, I can share with you my list of schools that I applied to. I think like I, it must be somewhere in some weird folder that I wrote. But I think I might have emailed it to Aditi some time ago, so I can hopefully dig it out again. But like, my list of schools was also basically like some top, some medium, and like some safe, like, which I was sure that I will definitely get into. Yeah, so I think that's it. Those were the questions in the chat. Are there any other questions that people would like to ask? Again, my Ambrose.
Yeah, hello.
Yeah, Aditi.
I just I mean, what are we supposed to submit while submitting the application?
Aditi, can you type it? You got cut off.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, now I can. Yeah.
What are we supposed to submit while submitting the application?
As in like the official documents.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think like again, it can differ from university to university.
Application or that can be sent later also. That was.
So for instance, the GRE can be sent later and so on. But like I'll just quickly tell you what every university definitely asks for. One is your transcript. So get that ready. You don't need your degree certificate that you need when you get admitted. So not at the time of application. Then the documents are GRE, TOEFL, SOP everyone asks for. Writing sample is optional. And letters of recommendation are compulsory. So usually you need 3 LORs. Some places ask for 2. And I think you can also provide like supplementary writers can also be present. But what I've heard is that they don't even bother to look at the 4th recommendation letter. But in case like you want to send it, it's fine. Um, yeah, so I think those are the compulsory documents. The rest is optional. Is work experience like internships important? I would think like what are the kind of internships? Like are they research internships? I think those can be important. But again, I think that internships are important to the extent that they provide you letters of recommendation. Because like oh sorry, Aditi, your CV also is compulsory. So CV also you need to write. So I would say like sure you can list all your internships in the CV, but like they don't matter because they don't really know what you did in the internship. Like when I was in undergrad, I did an internship where they made me take printouts. So like it's like obviously I don't mention that in my CV, um but they want to make sure that you weren't doing internships where they made you take printouts for sure, right? So I think internships are important to the extent that you network with the people you're interning with and eventually might as well ask them for a letter of recommendation and hope that they write you like a star studded LOR. Okay. Um, yeah, I think those were all the questions. Is there anything else? Okay. In that case, again, want to emphasize that SOPs applications are very personalized. Yeah, sorry, Pavitra, I have no idea about that. Like, GPA calculated in the how is this GPA calculated in the US PhD applications? Um, I don't remember how I did this. I probably just Googled it. Because I remember I had a lot of trouble getting this right. So if you could maybe give me your email ID, I'll follow up with you on that because yeah, I remember this caused me a lot of heartache because I had no idea, but I somehow managed it. A good range of academic grades that gets one into top university, how much of a weight do they hold in one's application? So I think like yeah, I'm not sure about this. I think it depends from school to school. Like um Columbia has some sense of what is a top grade in an Indian university. So they will like they for instance like they only consider applications that have like a 70% plus at Columbia from Delhi School of Economics. So I think they have their own measure of what is a good grade at Indian universities. But I think like they definitely hold a lot of weight in your application. But I still think you can get around it by having very good letters of recommendation. Like I did not have a 70% in Delhi School of Economics, but I still got in where I wanted to be. And I think that was because probably, I mean, I should probably ask my letter writers what they wrote, but my sense is that it was because my letters were strong. So it's not like not having the top grades is the end of the world. Uh, but um, but I think if you can get top grades, that'll be great for your application. Um, I'm going to save this chat. Okay, great. So that I can follow up later. All right. Yeah. Other questions? Okay. About funding and financial aspect of doing PhD in the US. So funding in the US is very convenient. You mostly don't have to apply for separate fundings because your PhD offer comes with a tuition waiver, health insurance, in my case, dental insurance. I also got a transitional stipend to book my flights to here and your monthly stipend. So you're very well covered in most cases. The problem, I think, is funding for applications. So I know that Cornell had waived my um, application fees, which was, I think, $80 or something like that. So there are some schools that can provide you a waiver for the application fees, but that is also not very common. But for the financial aspect of doing the PhD, it is always, at least economics PhDs that I know, they're fully funded. I know that in my department, there are people who come with Fulbright funding, but they're mostly from Latin America. As far as India is concerned, I don't think Fulbright funds your full PhD. It only funds visiting scholars for a year or two. Um, in the US, and they fund postdoctoral fellowships. They do not fund like your entire PhD in India from Fulbright. I think they do it in some other countries. But the best idea would be to like just get funding from the university, and if you have and if you can apply for external fundings later while you're doing the PhD, I think that that's also great. Okay. Other questions? Okay. In that case, I'll sign off. I also have to run for another meeting today. It was great talking to you and trying to answer your questions. I don't know if I was able, and I and Costa were able to do full justice to it. But you have my email ID, you have Kaustubh's email ID. I've also given you the email ID of Suved in the chat, who has also kindly agreed to look at SOPs and application materials of members of Bahujan Econ. So please write to all of us, and we hope to stay in touch. All right. Bye bye.